Welcome to Auntie's Art Club, and today we are making a mindful landscape using watercolors. So you're going to need heavy paper or watercolor paints, water in a jar, paintbrushes, maybe a pencil, a black marker for sure. And once you've got all that, let's get started. The reason I called this one Mindful Landscapes is I want you to get comfy. I want you to find a place where you can sit and draw mindfully. If you can find a landscape to look at, that's great. If it's winter and you just want to Google a landscape or use a picture that you've taken in the past, that's great too. This video was made in the fall and I was able to sit outside and look at the water. And I was looking at the water through some trees. I am not going for realism here. I am going for stylized lines, taking my time, petting my dog, hanging out in the sunshine. So try to take this slow and do a rough sketch of the main lines you see in your landscape. So I did one line that represents across the lake because I was looking at a lake. That's the landscape I was looking at. One line is across the lake, and the line on the bottom here is my closest shore of the lake. So it's in between those is going to be my lake. And I spent some time making almost like craggly rock looking on the closer shore just by wiggling lines. Mindful drawing, you want to practice your style. So do you like to make your lines a little thicker and thinner? Play around with it. Then I noticed that there were trees in the way of my view. So between me and the lake, there were trees. I was going to draw those. There are way more trees than what I drew. Otherwise, it would have been a very chaotic picture. So I drew 3 trees and I looked at real trees to get the shape, and I took my time moving my pen the way a tree grows, branching off, branching off, branching off. And as you can see, this is my view. It was inspired by the view, but it is not an exact photograph of the view. It's not an exact copy of the view. I was inspired by the trees. I was inspired by the lake, but I'm not going for perfection here. I am going for mindful drawing. So take some time once you've sketched out your drawing, and you could pull it right from your imagination if you want, or you can just kind of copy what I did here. But if you want to find a landscape to work from, that's also awesome, like a picture or an actual landscape. Fill in your details. So once you've got the sketch, I went over it and I filled in the details. And this was filmed outside, so it's not the clearest, but I was adding branches to the trees, lots and lots of branches to the trees, and taking time to round any sharp edges, because that was the style I wanted to go for. Remember, we are different artists, so yours might look different than mine. So here I'm adding in the details of the trees. And at this point, I wasn't even looking at the trees. I was inside, and I was going more with my imagination and my mindful drawing, which is taking my time to get these lines right. So we're going to be painting over this. But before you do your painting, using a waterproof marker like a Sharpie, you want to draw the outline of your landscape. So I spent lots of time getting the lines just how I wanted them. You can see I kind of soften where 2 lines meet. That's my style. Again, you do what you're going to do. Take your time getting this part how you like it. This is the really mindful part. Taking the time to get your landscape nice and bold and with all the details necessary. And for this, we are playing with lines. Essentially, you're creating a coloring page for yourself. Do you see what we've done here? We're just creating the lines, and then we're going to go and paint once we're done all the lines. So create your own coloring page. Have fun playing with the idea of thicker lines, thinner lines, lines that curve. Discover your own artistic style. When you're all done, give your paper a little bit of time to dry so the ink doesn't run. Maybe 10 minutes should be good if you're using a Sharpie. And then start filling in the background colors. Now, this is essentially a coloring exercise, but using paints. So you can see at the top I had my sunset kind of colors, and again you can pick whatever colors you like. And then I had the gentle reflection of that in the water. So I didn't color in my trees. I'm just coloring the water that I can see behind the trees. I decided to add waves to my water. Say you were doing a landscape with grass, you could add the grass details. I was playing with perspective here, so the waves closer to me are bigger than the waves farther away. And I took a little bit of a break and I went over my lines because when I painted them, they kind of faded under the paint. And this is totally optional. You can do this as you go. You can do this at the end. You cannot do this at all. But I kind of liked going over my lines, and I wasn't sure what colors I wanted to do for my trees and my rocks. So taking that time to go over the lines, I started thinking, okay, I want to do some browns. This is an imaginary type piece, so you can do any color you like. I mixed in some blues with my tree, some blues with the browns. And the bottom, I imagine, is rocks and moss. And so I did a base color for the rocks and the trees of a light brown. I didn't put too much pigment in it, and then I let it dry, and I went back with a fine paintbrush, my ridiculously small paintbrush, and I started adding details. So these are the details you might see if you're observing nature. How does tree bark grow? How do those lines look? They're actually really fun to play with drawing. So I was playing with the idea of trees growing and how the bark kind of splits. And down on the ground, I'm playing with the different textures that you might see on a forest floor. So I had some roots, and I was going for almost like a moss and different greens. And each little section of my landscape, I did a slightly different thing and just mindfully played with the colors. And remember that you can build up layers of paint. So do your first color, and then you can always add lines, you can add different colors. With watercolor, whatever you paint on top is going to mix with the other layers. So just be aware of that. It's the fun of watercolor. And so let's just go over the steps because this is all there is to it. First, you draw your imaginary or mindful landscape, however you want to think of it. Be inspired by something in nature. Spend some time looking at nature if you can, or pictures of nature. It's very relaxing. And then once you got your lines done, you do kind of your first painting, putting in your background colors. And then you go over and add some other colors to it, some other textures. Layer up your paint. Look at, if you're doing waves, maybe how do the waves far away look? Well, they're little. And when you get closer, they look bigger because that's how perspective works. So play with all of those things. Experiment. There is no right, there is no wrong. This is about sitting and mindfully creating something that makes you happy and helps you discover your inner artist. Your art is not going to look like my art because we are not the same artist. And I'm so excited to see what you're going to create and what your mindful landscape is going to look like. I really think part of this is observing nature. Have a look at the way lines move, at the way the waves look, at the way the tree bark grows, at the different little textures and details on the ground. And don't try to copy them. Use those to inspire your painting. So I'm not copying tree bark. I'm letting my paint flow the way tree bark flows and grows. I'm not copying what I see in front of me. I'm being inspired by it. And then I'm taking it through the lens of my own artistic self, and I am putting it on the paper. And it's like you are interpreting this landscape. This is all about practicing using your tools, playing with lines, playing with textures, and having fun. Remember, having fun is the most important part of doing art, and that there is no way you can get this wrong because you're doing it. And just as an FYI, this took me over 5 hours. There is no rushing your art. Take your time. Focus on the details, practice, and be kind to yourself. Thank you so much for creating with me, and I'll see you next week for more Auntie's Art Club.